Let's go across to our guest who is joining us. We are being joined by Charles A. Kopchin, Senior Fellow, Council on Foreign Relations and Professor of International Affairs at Georgetown University. Thanks very much, sir, for speaking with WION.
Happy to join you.
Sir, I want to talk to you about this ramping of rhetoric from Moscow blaming Washington for the Kremlin drone attack. Now, with the facts that are in public domain at the moment and the strategies that you've analyzed of both Russia, Kyiv, NATO, Washington, is this just aggressive posturing, to win a battle of perception by Moscow, or can it lead to a possible escalation, something much more bigger, as EU foreign policy chief is worried about?
Well, there isn't a lot of hard information in the public domain. One would have thought that if the Russians have hard evidence that these drones flew from Ukraine, were under the direction of the Ukrainian government, that they would disclose that information. For example, intercepts of communications, flight path of the drone. There has been no such disclosure of information. And as a consequence, I think one has to view with skepticism the Russian claim that this was Ukraine and that this is part of a campaign of sabotage. For two different reasons, I would be very surprised if Ukraine was behind the attack. Number one, they're focused on the offensive, which is soon to begin. They want to use their military capability to get back territory. It doesn't make sense for them to provoke Russia by hitting the Kremlin. And secondly, the Kremlin has said that the U.S. is behind this attack. The U.S. has been telling the Ukrainians not to take shots against Russian territory. It would not be in the interests of the United States to see an escalation. So right now, I think the Kremlin's claims simply lack credibility.
Right.
Right. So also, given these developments, what options do you think both sides are left with? What would it take for the two sides to come to the negotiating table?
I think the negotiating table is rather far off. The Ukrainians are about to launch their offensive. The Russians have been fighting for the last few months further north around Bakhmut. Neither side seems ready to call it quits and try to negotiate an endgame. My best guess is we're going to see the offensive begin quite soon. As the weather gets warmer, the mud dries up, it's easier for Ukrainian tanks and armored vehicles to head toward the Russian front lines. I think we can expect a bloody summer. Then, maybe toward the end of this fighting season, when both sides are exhausted, both sides have taken a lot more casualties, it may be possible for the U.S. and others to try to broker a ceasefire and a diplomatic conversation. But we are certainly not there now.
All right, Professor Kopchin, thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast with your insights on this.
My pleasure.